Exile here on the Q96.5 FM, just after 10 o'clock, and as we do every week at this time, we sit down and we talk a little bit about some of the medical issues that are around the area and the world. And today I'm very fortunate to have with me Mr. Bob Golding with Davlin. He's the VP for Research and Development. And Bob, good to have you in here today. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me, Jim.
You know, this is a situation where the other day I saw in the paper, okay, and whether people read the paper or not, I still read the paper and I still see the articles every now and then, and you had an interesting one that was in the paper a week or so ago that I want to get to, but I want to start the whole thing off by getting a little background on you, because I think there are people who in Bryan, Ohio know who Bob Golding is, and then there are people in Bryan, Ohio who kind of know who Bob Golding is but don't really know anything about Bob Golding, and I always like to start that way. Where's Bob from originally?
I grew up in suburban West Jefferson, I guess you would say, just outside of it. So, Montpelier area.
Okay, there you go. Suburban West Jefferson.
Yeah, which is a joke for anyone that doesn't know that West Jefferson has like maybe 10 houses.
That's fantastic, man. Where'd you go to school? Were you a Montpelier guy, or?
Yeah, I was a Montpelier guy, and then all of my college experience was in Michigan at Hillsdale and then Michigan State.
Ah, there you go. You know, Hillsdale is one of those really neat little schools. I had a cousin whose son played football in that league. And so for about 4 years, every other year, we'd end up at Hillsdale to watch a football game because they'd come up and it was a family get-together. And when you walk around that college campus, it really is amazing to see what they have in that little footprint that they have up in Hillsdale.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I like Hillsdale. I mean, I went to school there. The interesting part of going to Hillsdale in some ways is that for its student population is kind of unique. Just that, you know, their political stance on not taking government money is kind of allowed them to attract better talent in some ways, just because they were unique. And for anyone that doesn't know about that, Hillsdale actually had black female professors before the Civil War. Yeah. They sent about half of their student body to go fight in the Civil War. They were very, shall we say, you know, pro-abolition, pro-equal rights. And, I mean, they had done this before. Any university in Michigan, to my knowledge, especially having female professors. And in the 70s, as part of implementing the 1964 Civil Rights Act, I believe, the federal government required them to have a census of their students in their race and ethnicity and gender. And Hillsdale had never done that because they had founded on a principle that we didn't care and weren't interested in it, and they stuck to their guns on it. So Hillsdale, to my knowledge, still doesn't know how many of their students are male, female, you know, or at least officially, and of what race they are. And so they don't take federal money because otherwise they'd be compelled to, you know, aggregate that data. And I think that's admirable. I'm not going to say everything Hillsdale has done politically I agree with, but that's what makes Hillsdale a unique little college. It means that they draw a bigger crowd than normal. I mean, the graduation speaker for the class before me was Clarence Thomas, as an example, in a place with 1,200 students.
Yeah. So. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, that really is. And a very conservative school on its by its nature, okay? But I think we've gotten to a point in this world nowadays where to say that something is conservative, we put a negative spin to that, and I don't think that that's a negative connotation that should go to Hillsdale.
Yeah, and to be fair, I was in the hard sciences there, so you know I wasn't a poli-sci major or something that had been heavily involved in that. I mean that's and Hillsdale's not conservative in the sense of what are the Jerry Falwell's University Liberty, where right, right. No interracial dating and all that kind of stuff. It's not like that at all.
Yeah, not at all. It's amazing.
And it actually has no religious affiliation either, which is sort of interesting because most small schools do in that.
They do, yeah.
Yeah.
Almost all of them.
Yeah.
That's how they've survived at some point in time in their history. There's no doubt.
Right, yeah. And anyway, it's a nice school. I got nothing bad to say about Hillsdale.
How did you end up at Hillsdale then?
Well, a bunch of different reasons, but my parents are actually alumni, so I certainly was exposed to it pretty early on, and I went to their summer science camps, of all things, which I would recommend for high school kids, and got to do a lot of, for being 16 years old, pretty interesting science, and that was a big part of it. I mean, getting to see things like electron microscopes at that age kind of pushes you towards science, I would say.
Yeah. So you had a love for science at a very young age.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah. Why? What got you involved?
Well, about half of my family went to medical school, and about half of my family went to engineering or hard sciences as a career. So okay. I'm kind of halfway between medical and engineering as a background. So I grew up around both of those.
Okay.
My grandfather, who actually passed away last night, was a surgeon, and he was also head of medicine at a major hospital in the Metro Detroit area when I was young. And my mother went to medical school. She actually doesn't practice, but I was around that from an early age.
That's amazing. Well, I'm sorry to hear about your grandfather too. How old was your grandfather?
90.
Yeah, that's the other side of it. I lost my mom this last summer, and on one side it's a very devastating time to lose anybody, but the other side you really do have to look back and say, wow. 90 good years, 86 good years, the last couple being kind of rough. You've done pretty well if you can get to that point.
Yeah, I mean, he was running around and driving until a month ago, so and that's kind of the way you would want it to go. I mean, he was prone to saying that that we treat our dogs better than humans as far as end of life care, which is a whole big discussion there about how to handle that. But no, it's thank you for your condolences.
Yeah, well, it's a tough time. No matter who they are, no matter how old they are, and it's just part of life, unfortunately. Bob Golding with us right now from Davlin. Let's get into Davlin. How did you end up back with the folks over in Davlin?
I would give Dave Swanson all the credit in the world for this. This is actually also, this week is my 10th anniversary of working at Davlin for Dave. And I will be completely honest that when I interviewed at Davlin, I was not all that interested in that. I thought I had a better interview lined up later that week, and this was almost a practice one. And the interview devolved into a hour and 40-minute discussion between Dave Swanson and I, and things worked out, and I wound up working there. And that's the vast majority of my time. I really like my job. I get to do all sorts of interesting things. I've been in 34 countries in the last 10 years. I've been in major teaching hospitals. I've given talks. I've done a lot of interesting stuff. For a little Bryan, Ohio company, Davlin does interesting things, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I can see how you would fit just perfectly with Dave in that company. I've always enjoyed Dave and the conversations we've had. It's one guy walking the streets of Bryan that if you haven't had a chance to sit down and spend a couple minutes, it's worthy of a cup of coffee, and what would be 15 minutes probably will end up being closer to an hour.
I will say that, I answer to Dave, and I have for 10 years, and I've never had any other supervisors at Davlin, I don't think. About 95% of the time, Dave and I absolutely agree on things without any, we're very often of the same mind. And the other 5% of times it's sort of a toss-up. And some of those are colorful and interesting. Sometimes I get my way, sometimes he gets his way, but it's a very good relationship.
That's the way, if you could do it that well. I think that when I went through all my interpersonal communications classes back at OU, back in the dark ages, when you hit 50-50,
yeah.
When the negatives started to outweigh the positives, that's when things started to go south for most employees. And so if you could hit 95% of the time where you're on the same page, you've got the ultimate job in your hands at that point, I think.
Yeah, well, I think Dave Swanson is actually in an airplane halfway back at the moment, not listening to this. So let's not tell him too much of this. I'll never get a raise again. But
that's great. Let's tell the folks, because I think most people know that Davlin is in Bryan. Most people know that they make those funny, crazy tanning machines that are somehow in the medical industry. So give me a better description of what Davlin does.
Okay, I can give a really quick history of Davlin. People who have been in town for a while probably knew the Elder Pharmaceutical Company, which now it's Nostrum or whatever, the physical building. Mm-hmm. And one of their products that they developed in the late 50s, 60s, and 70s was Sorolin, oxorolin, which is it's a photosensitizing drug that requires UVA light, and it's typically used to treat psoriasis, vitiligo, and eczema. So in the late 70s, Dave Swanson started working there in various sales roles, and they were developing and commercializing Sorolin. And so when he had the opportunity to go out on his own, he decided that was the business he knew, and he would go into the machine side of it rather than the drug side. And so the early history of Davalin is building these machines with UVA light that you would use with the drug. The drug was approved in 81, which is also about when Davalin was founded. It's nice timing. And since then, we've branched off into other areas of generally light-based stuff. We do a little bit of stuff that's outside of light for hyperhidrosis. It's like excessive sweating. That's a whole other chunk of our business. We've grown a lot in the sense that in my time at Davalin, in the last 10 years, narrowband ultraviolet B, UVB phototherapy for treatment of psoriasis has really taken off. I mean, it's a treatment that's we have really good safety data on it. It's unlike tanning or sunlight in that respect. Patients are happy with it, doctors are happy with it, and it's relatively cost effective for the healthcare ecosystem. Okay. So that's most of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Okay, all right. So the difference between the beds, the tanning beds that you put out. Okay. Well, I hate that. Like, every time you say tanning, I cringe. But that's I know it looks like one. I understand that.
I think, and I think for 90% of the people walking the streets at this point in time, that's how they equate that.
You're right.
If they've taken a tour, and you guys have been so gracious oftentimes to have your facilities open to the public to come in, see the new additions and all those things. Oh, let's take you down. Here's the product line. No matter how you explain it to them, no matter how many times it goes through there, the thing that sticks in their mind is, oh, that's one of those medical tanning beds out there, which I apologize. I'll do that to you.
I will say this, that any fluorescent lamp, if you look at it when it's off, it just looks like a big white tube. Okay? Sure. And the glass has some effect, but mainly that white powder on the inside you see when you break it, the phosphor, determines what kind of light comes out of there. Okay. And there are infinite combinations of this. Okay? And when you talk about a tanning lamp, it's up in UVA. It's got a little bit of UVB. A common tanning lamp maybe has 2-3% UVB content.
UVB is, for the folks listening right now, ultraviolet blue?
Yeah, ultraviolet B. Okay. All right. Ultraviolet's divided up into UVA, UVB, and UVC. UVC you see in germicidal uses, like wastewater treatment plant, something like that, and it kills bacteria and so forth. You'll also see that in hospitals, so forth, just to sterilize entire rooms. Okay. When you get up into UVB, there's a little bit of UVB in sunlight, but not very much. Okay, and that's something that what we do mostly right now. If you sat in our shipping dock and looked at things going out, it would be narrowband UVB. Narrowband UVB is entirely UVB. It's 90-some plus % UVB, and it's at a very specific wavelength range between about 310 and 320 nanometers. And the reason for that wavelength range is that Harvard Medical School did a study in the late 80s where they looked at psoriasis patients and they tried each individual wavelength of light. And they discovered that is what actually helps psoriasis patients, was that wavelength. It turns out that the underlying immune mechanisms as to why it affects psoriasis also work for other diseases. So since then, we've expanded what we do with that particular wavelength. But if you look at it comparison to a tanning lamp would be lucky to have 1% of its power down in that useful range of 310 to 320. Sunlight would be a couple percent. It'd be very low compared to what this is. Generally speaking, it won't even tan you. It'll burn you, but it won't tan you with a big dose.
Okay, all right. How did they come about? Who decided that UV rays were a medical, more of a medical device than anything else? Where'd that history go to?
A guy named Finson won the Nobel Prize in 1903, actually using concentrated sunlight to treat tuberculosis, and the skin manifestation of tuberculosis, and that's kind of the beginning of the modern phototherapy era. Is that? I mean, certainly people had stayed out in the sun before that. In Israel, they've done this Dead Sea soak where they get in salt water and then they're exposed to sunlight for probably millennia. If you look in the Bible, some of the leprosy people report there is probably really psoriasis. People of Jewish ethnicity are prone to psoriasis. It makes more sense that when you look at the treatments in there, that they were getting concentrated sunlight.
Okay.
Then, honestly, the next really big innovation, I mean, there's some stuff with coal tar and UVB lamps in the 1920s at Mayo Clinic, is Elder Pharmaceutical Company commercializing Sorolins in Bryan, Ohio, which is something that does not get a whole lot of, probably, unless you're in dermatology or in medicine, you would not know that was important, what they did down there for a while.
Yeah, no doubt. So it's a combination now of a pill.
And the we still do that.
Okay.
We also do monotherapies with narrowband UVB. It's typically a monotherapy. Okay. Puva, which is still used, we sell machines for Puva at least once a week. That absolutely is a pill or a soak in a chemical. Okay.
So now you basically moved away from the chemical side or the pill side.
Yeah,
primarily, and just treat with the UV rays.
Yeah, frankly, anything up into UVA around 340 nanometers in particular, you start seeing some cancer risk. And it doesn't mean it's not a valid treatment. I mean, right now, you could walk into Rite Aid and I could point out 20 drugs on the shelf that are perfectly usable but also increase your rate of X cancer by some amount. So this is a therapeutic trade-off that you make in certain situations. Narrowband UVB, what we do now, has got a really good safety track record. It was adopted early in Scotland, which is a population that has a very high rate of skin cancer.
Okay.
And they also track all their patients over time, and they don't see any increase. So we're really comfortable with 20 years of follow-up data from Scotland that, by and large, narrowband UVB is safe. That you're not looking at a long-term cancer risk. You're looking at it being effective. It's a mature treatment at this point. It absolutely is. If you look at the National Psoriasis Foundation, for example, it's on their treatment ladder right after topical steroids. It's absolutely standard of care to use narrowband UVB.
Yeah. Now UVA, the top. I don't think we discussed that one.
Yeah. We do a little stuff in UVA up by visible light. So when you're young, we nominally say 400 nanometers is the break between UVA and visible, but that's not totally true. When you're young, you can see down to about 380, 385. You perceive it as purple.
Okay.
When you get older, you start losing that ability, and you even start losing the ability to see blue as the lens in your eye yellows over time.
Okay.
Everybody has seen this, whether they knew it or not. It's the reason that elderly women tend to put the blue rinse dye in their hair is they have a hard time seeing blue as their eye ages. So their hair looks yellow to them unless they make it more blue to overcome this problem.
I'll be darned.
So this is your eye ages. But anyway, when you get up by visible light, that particular chunk we call UVA1, very close to visible light. We do a lot of stuff in that area as well. Davlin commercialized that in the U.S. It's used for unusual diseases. Some of them are skin-related, like scleroderma. You can use it for eczema, but we actually, we see it more for autoimmune, unusual things, lupus. We see it for graft versus host disease, which is typically where someone has leukemia, they get a bone marrow transplant, and their body rejects it. Okay. So it's a totally different mechanism of action than narrowband UVB, way at the other end of UVB that we deal with, or UV that we deal with. That's something that most of those diseases are rare enough. The equipment used to treat it, you only see in big teaching centers. You see it at Mayo Clinic. You see it at University of Michigan. You're probably not going to see that at community hospitals in Williams County.
Right.
They're not going to have the patient pool of the unusual diseases to justify that.
Sure. Well, when they see that, then they refer you to that hospital.
Right, exactly. I doubt that at a community hospital level they're going to treat much of that themselves, frankly.
No doubt. All right, Bob Golding is our guest. He's with Davlin, and the thing that caught my eye in the paper the other day, we're going to get to here in a minute, because there is some potential here with all the problems we're having with the opioids, that maybe some of these treatments could help those patients as well, and we'll get into that after we pay a couple bills. You've got the Q 96.5 FM. We're in the Medical Hour, brought to you by the Medical Specialty Clinics of the Bryan Hospital and community health professionals.
Dealerships must maintain.
And I'm back with Bob Golding, who's the VP for Research at Davlin here in Bryan, and we're talking about the things that company does. And so, Bob, let's get into that. There was an article in the paper a week ago, okay, and it said that there is a potential now, and I think anything, whenever we get into the opioid crisis that we have right now, I think we all agree that's one of the biggest medical issues we have. And there is a potential now with some of the devices that you guys work with of maybe helping in this problem. Explain that to us just a little bit.
Yeah, okay. There's been a couple little pilot studies done with shingles patients and what we call post-herpetic neuralgia, which is basically pain from shingles, especially pain long-lasting after the initial outbreak.
Yeah.
And it looks like UVB actually fixes the pain for them. And the reason why it does this, if you think about shingles, somewhat simplified, this is a virus that's resident in the nerves. That this is where it lives. Okay, and so when your body attacks it, when you have an outbreak of this, you have this inflammation in the nerves, attacking the nerves. Misplaced aggression from your immune system is really what's kind of causing that long-term pain, or a significant part of it. So some of that's probably mediated by what we call Th17, which Th17 was only discovered about less than 10 years ago it's a tiny immune system messenger. And it turns out that probably the reason that our devices and narrowband UVB work in psoriasis is it's also a Th17 mediated disease.
Okay.
Right now there's a bunch of effort into developing drugs that target Th17 directly, that you'd take a shot once a month or something, and they're remarkably effective in psoriasis, and they drop the Th17 level, and then we drop the Th17 level. But looking at all this, the shingles reaction probably has some Th17 mediated stuff to it, okay? And if you take a shingles patient, it looks like you can do two different things. You can treat somewhat prophylactically. Somebody came down with shingles, you gave them a small course of phototherapy, and their odds of developing long-term pain drop, okay? Which is great. That you just treat everybody basically with a short course, and you just drop your pool that's coming in with a lot of pain. Something like 20% of shingles patients get horrible pain. And
I can speak to that. My mom, before she died, she had shingles, and it was really one of those things. She had leukemia, okay? One of the milder forms of leukemia, and had it for a long time. Went in to get the shingles vaccine one year. The pharmacist at the drugstore that she was at in Troy, Ohio said, "Oh boy, leukemia, I don't think we can give you this vaccination. Go talk to your doctor." She was of that vintage that just said, "Okay, not a problem," didn't do that.
Just
okay?
didn't follow up, yeah.
Didn't follow up with that whole thing because she just heard a no and said she wasn't going to do it. Got shingles, and to her dying day had the most severe pain still in that one side that was left over from those shingles for 5 years. That was the biggest complaint that she had, was that.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, there is a vaccine, and I certainly encourage people that are candidates for the vaccine to get it.
Sure.
Not everybody's going to be a candidate for it, because especially when you look at an aging population, the number of people that are immunosuppressed for some other reason, they've got arthritis, so they're on, say, anti-TNF biologic like etanercept, Enbrel, it's pretty high. There are people that just didn't get the vaccine. There are people the vaccine didn't work for. Some of this is a game of percentages. Not any vaccine is 100% effective in everybody. Just it's not. So anything you can do to cut down the people entering this pipeline of eventually having horrible pain is good. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons I think it's interesting is that there are a lot of shingles patients that wind up getting treated with opioids at some point in their, and that
she was one of them.
And it's not necessarily inappropriate. This is they're in severe pain, but if you had an opportunity to intervene earlier upstream and knock that down, why wouldn't you?
Right.
And so, since this has been published, some years ago by other researchers that looked at it, and the devices involved are off patent, there's not a huge commercial motivation to do much with this. This is not something where funding a clinical trial on it necessarily is a wise use of Davilin's resources. Not saying we won't. It's just you can see that there might be a question of priorities there.
Sure.
And the state is desperate for ideas right now. They're using the Third Frontier program. They have this opioid challenge where it's just throw ideas at them. Right. And so I threw this at them, and we'll see if they're interested or not. And in some ways, I don't really want them to just, grant us some money to do it ourselves. I would rather Ohio's, Medicaid operation, which has their own what's called an IRB, which is the institutional review board you use to set up clinical trials, that they ran a clinical trial with their own patients on this. Like, that's something that I think they have the resources, they have the interest in this, or presumably to do this.
So the idea would be that you would be eliminating the potential opiate addicted person who had shingles, then got onto the painkillers. Because I can tell you, my mom was on every opioid product known to man. It didn't affect that pain whatsoever. She still had the same pain. But if we would have gotten to that point where we could have gotten past the leukemia, I think she probably was so hooked on opioids that we would have had a heck of a time getting that 86-year-old woman off of the drugs, actually.
Well, and some of this also is about diversion too.
Yeah.
Okay. So shingles pain is somewhat unquantifiable, right? Somebody has a broken leg, they have a broken leg, you can look at them, you can tell. It's one of these areas of pain management that I don't want to say is rife with abuse, but it certainly has some. And so, you're looking at patients that themselves, develop a problem, but you're also looking at patients that, there's a bottle of pills sitting in their bathroom cupboard and their grandkid comes over and takes them, or they sell them, or whatever. And this is, there's a lot of different factors in play there. But if you look way upstream, that if that prescription was never written and the person wasn't in pain, it's kind of a good thing,
Right. Yes, no doubt. It would be a great thing, and it's just one. That was the thing when we got her to a point where she was in hospice, and they sent over a medical pack. Okay, when you look through her kitchen, if somebody who really was an opioid user knew what she had in her kitchen, they would have broken in and robbed her.
Right, the street value of all this stuff,
was unbelievable. And at that point in time, it was, okay, Mrs. Funderdome, you need more? Okay, here. And instead of sending one, they'd send 3 bottles of that.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not morally opposed to that when it's sort of an end of life situation. That there are times there where, it's not really a worry if somebody develops a tolerance and becomes habituated to opioids if they're 95. This is
Right.
It's in some ways. Like, that's a small piece of the puzzle, is safe drug disposal is part of that, and handling that, and you, obviously being an upstanding citizen, didn't look at all that when she passed and decided to go sell it.
Yeah.
Like, but there's certainly people that would have looked around there and be like, I'm getting a new flat screen TV. Look at all this,
Exactly.
and that's.
And you know what the response was? That was the one. This is still something that will amaze me till the day that I die, because when we called and we said to them, we have all this medication, what do we do? And the response was, don't go, just flush it down the toilet.
Yeah. It'll be good for the fish, right?
And that's what, and my brother works for the city of Troy, and that was okay. I mean, that was the response that they gave to a number of people. And I said, hold on a minute. I mean, how many people do you honestly have in this city who all of a sudden are taking, bottle after bottle and dumping it into your water supply, basically? And I know you got a treatment plan and everything else, but how do you get rid of all the opium and opioids that are in this? I don't know. It was mind numbing to me. I said, how about if we pack them up and we bring them to the police station and we hand them to you? How's that?
Yeah.
And then you flush them down the
toilet. If you want to do that, they can do it themselves.
It was unbelievable, the things that you can't get into that. All right, Bob Golding is my guest right now, and we're talking about Davelin, and we've just barely scratched the surface. Time for some Ohio news, and once we come back, I do want to get into all the other things that they do. And I really was intrigued with the comments that we had the other day as they was trying to take a new product to trial here, and how much the government does get in testing and some of the hurdles that you have to walk around, jump over, run through, whatever. It's 20 minutes before 11. I've got Bob Golding from Davelin with me. We're in the Medical Hour, brought to you by the Medical Specialty Clinics of the Bryant Hospital and Community Health Professionals. some of the other things that Davlin does, because you know, we're just scratching the surface. You guys do all types of things in that building over there, don't you?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Why? Crazy science going on over there. Crazy mad science. Talk to me a little bit about what are some of the other things that go on at Davlin?
Okay, something that I think a lot of people in the area probably don't know is that device companies are regulated just the same way as drug companies under what's called GMP, Good Manufacturing, by the FDA. So we basically are, even though our devices are not sterile and aren't implanted or anything like that, there's not a lot of leeway in the rules for that. Instead, we're treated about the same. We have to have the same procedures. We get audited by the same people. Frankly, we get audited by, in a given year, about 6 different companies or organizations. And that's an incredible regulatory burden. I mean, this is just a massive amount of time and effort and paperwork. And you know, we get audited by a gentleman that comes in to make sure that we don't have any wood that's not heat treated, because we're certified to ship outside the United States. We have to log every inch of 2x4 that comes and leaves the building.
Oh gosh!
And we have to pay something like $400 a month for the privilege of having him check this. We have the CE mark, which you can see on the back of most electronic devices that are sold in Europe, which is a CE medical mark is not trivial to get. Getting it from scratch takes 6 months. It's a lot of testing and data and whatever. We obviously, we mentioned earlier the FDA. The FDA has the authority to be in your facility for as long as they want to be there. So if they come over, they could be there. Davlin had an FDA inspection 20 years ago where they were there for 3+ weeks.
Oh, wow.
And at the end of it, the ironic part is they didn't find anything. We got a good report. And the inspector's boss sent somebody else back 2 months later because he assumed that we had bribed the first inspector because he had been there so long that without any violations. You know,
that's amazing.
Yeah.
Brian's just a nice place to be, and Davlin's a wonderful spot to go to work every day. You know, that's the key.
Yeah, for the most part. Yeah, I guess he really must have really liked his meals he was getting at, I guess, Kaufman's back at that era, or found a girlfriend or something. But yeah, so we have individual countries that have their own strict rules. So we have Brazilians come and audit us once a year. That's an interesting one. We had the South Koreans this year. We go through, they don't audit us directly typically. We go through a lot of regulatory hurdles with Japan. Anyone that's, I guess, an electrician or involved in that kind of thing, Japan's got the most interesting electricity in the world. Since they were kind of a feudal state when electricity came, some islands have 50 hertz power, like Europe. Some have 60 hertz power, and it's all 100 volts, so it's the lowest voltage in the world. Wow. Building machines for Japan is a huge, complicated part of our business. Though they're good customers, and I like the Japanese. I've been there 3 times. Nothing bad to say about them other than it's a historical oddity that they have weird electricity. Yeah,
that's amazing. How many countries do you ship your product to?
We have distributors in about 70, and then we ship to probably another 10 or so. So let's just say 80.
Wow. And all of the regulators that you have to deal with by country, who's the most strict? Are the United States, are the folks here in the U.S. the most difficult to deal with, or is somebody else more?
I wouldn't say that they're not. I mean, certainly there are parts of the FDA's rules that are very stringent, and they do have more inspection authority. And that actually, just as a quick tangent, is a sore topic for me that the Chinese government restricts how many visas the FDA can have into their country to inspect FDA-accredited plants.
Okay.
So if you're a Chinese drug or device manufacturer, you might only get inspected once every 10 years because they don't have enough people to go around because of the Chinese government's own rule. Like, this is something I would love to see our administration take up with the Chinese and say, we get infinite inspector visas because we've had problems with bad Chinese food, drug, you name it. So the FDA is not, they're certainly hard. Frankly, I think the 2 toughest regulatory environments in the world for medical devices are Brazil and Japan. Okay. They both require specific testing. They don't take international results. They're both very expensive, complex markets. This is something that they both have very high taxes. A machine that we would sell to a doctor in the United States for $25,000 will sell for $50,000 there. Which is just, there's a much higher burden of doing business in Japan and Brazil, frankly.
That is amazing. different products for different countries? Or,
mostly different internal components for voltage. There are some. We make a product that's called the Lumera. That's it's sort of a broadband, high intensity UVB source, and we see that sold a fair bit into markets that have a lot of vitiligo. So vitiligo is this autoimmune disease where your skin becomes white, it loses all its pigment. Michael Jackson's problem.
Right. Sure.
And it's most prevalent in India, Pakistan, in that region, and people of that ethnicity as well. So something a lot of people probably know is that the United Kingdom had India as a colony for a long time, and they basically picked bright young Indians of certain groups there as administrators and clerks and so forth, and then took them all over the empire. So, you see a lot of Indian ethnicity people in South Africa, for example, which was a later colony, that they imported all of these Indians to run kind of these bookkeeping tasks, for the most part, other roles too. And so in those hot spots there, we see slightly more machines that are kind of more for vitiligo, okay? We see slightly more machines, or at least treatment of psoriasis in Northern Europe. Okay, when you look at Finland, Sweden, Germany, areas like that. We do have a strong German competitor, so we don't do a ton of business in Germany proper, but in that area anyway.
Okay. Now let's drill down a little bit on what it takes to get a product approved here in the United States, because I know you just went through. When we chatted to set this up, you were in the process of trying to get approval, and it didn't go as well as what you wanted it to go. Okay, but it wasn't because the product didn't do what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
So let me step away with that one and tell me how difficult it is to take something from a concept to reality in this world.
Okay, in the U.S., there's two different paths for medical devices. There's what's called PMA, and PMA would be an absolutely brand new invention that's never existed in the history of anything. Okay? Somebody, I'm making this up, but somebody designs a brain implant that fixes epilepsy.
Sure.
Okay? It is going to go through, it will be treated exactly like a major drug. It'll need clinical trials that cost many millions of dollars. And a PMA application alone, the application fee is $590,000 just that you pay the FDA. It goes through this review process. It takes several years. The majority of what we do is not PMA. It's on what's called the 510K process. 510Ks, as they exist right now, are sort of a mini PMA. They used to be incredibly easy to get, and that's been reduced and constricted over time. Now, to get a 510K in the U.S., you have to be substantially equivalent to some other product of some kind. Could be our own previous ones, could be a competitor that was on the market and was safe, I guess is the other thing. You have to provide some limited clinical data, but mostly you have to provide data about the actual safety of the device as far as function. And a big part of this is IEC testing. So IEC 60601 is this international standard which has been adopted by the FDA in the last few years. We didn't used to have to do it for the US FDA. We did it anyway because we needed it for Europe. But they've adopted the standard, and IEC testing on an individual device, no matter how small it is pretty much going to run you $30,000 to $50,000 in lab fees.
Wow. Okay.
And getting the testing done is sometimes an iterative process where you discover problems with your design or whatever and have to fix them. And these are not all problems that are necessarily wildly related to patient safety. Okay, the testing is quite strict, and it doesn't have a lot of leeway for things. This is an area that it is a very broad standard that can be applied to everything, and there are little cutouts for things like x-ray machines and MRI machines that we're not a big enough company with a big enough bunch of lobbying to get a special standard, which would be nice. It'd be a lot easier. I mean, it's way easier for an MRI company to pass some of their approval things than it is for us, but I'm not morally opposed to the IEC testing. I think in some ways the basic ideas of it are good. And the thing that annoys me the most is that in my time we've gone from the second revision to the third revision to the fourth revision. and some countries still require the second revision, which, you know, like you're going to have to test the thing 3 to 4 times, and just the costs of it get out of control. And also, it seems like that our ideas of patient safety shouldn't be changing every 3 or 4 years, frankly. You know, the first version of it lasted from 1988 until 2005.
Wow.
So, and now that we've had 3 new versions of it since 2005. Yeah, like that's a huge regulatory burden for us.
Sure,
you know,
sure.
like if we were, let's talk about big medical device companies, you know, like GE Healthcare or something. You know, that's probably a drop in the bucket. You know, they lose more changing their couches in the lobby than that costs them, right?
Yeah, right.
For us, it's a big deal. We've put a lot of time and effort and thought into it. The other part that's complicated, and that the FDA wants to see, is that what's called verification and validation. And I tend to think of this in terms of software. So, you know, almost everything's got software in it now. Just you name it, of some level. And you have to go through these very rigorous analysis of the software and how many lines it has and how it functions. And these things cost hundreds of thousands of dollars getting the software analyzed. And that's a burden, but it's a burden that, I mean, it's a rule written in blood. There was a radiation therapy machine called a Therac 25 about 20, 30 years ago. And they changed the software in it, and they didn't do all this stuff, and they killed a couple people with it.
Sure,
so,
sure.
You know, there's reasons for that, but it's a pain to do.
Yeah, and amazing. So when we talk about all of the red tape and all of the extra costs, you know, it's a real issue, especially for a company your size.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I guess we're technically a medium-sized company now, but it's still, you know, any reduction in that we're certainly aware of, right? And that's something that, when we look at international trade agreements, that's a huge deal, right? That, you know, I would love for, you know, Brazil to get smacked down by us, you know, that we won't import any sugar cane or something unless you know, get your taxes in line and become more normal about medical devices.
Sure,
you know?
Sure.
And, you know, this is the way these things work, I guess. The other people that regulate us that most people probably don't know is Medicare.
Okay.
We do sell home machines, you know, for patients typically with psoriasis, vitiligo, or eczema, and, you know, they're covered by insurance and so forth. And some of those are covered by Medicare. We're Medicare certified. We have all the whatever, and we get inspected just the same as a hospital or a doctor's office that bills Medicare. The problem is the inspectors that we deal with typically are used to dealing with hospitals and so forth, and they're we don't fit their mold. You know, we don't have patients in the building. You know, like patient safety is not a huge concern in our world. And I mean, we got written up at one point for having a can of air freshener in the women's bathroom that we didn't have an MSDS sheet for it.
Okay.
And you know, because this was a patient safety hazard. Well, it's not really, because there's no patients in Davlin.
No patients in Davlin.
Yeah, like, I mean, if anything, yes, it's an OSHA violation, a very mild one at that. You know, so obviously we now twice a year go around the entire building. We check for, I guess they're called safety data sheets now, but SDS sheets for everything in the entire building to prevent that. But
that's amazing.
Is an example, I guess.
It would hardly believe that would be on their radar when they came in to do the inspection for a manufacturer versus a hospital.
Yeah, we also got in trouble for inadequate signage on the outside because patients wouldn't be able to find us. We were in the process of replacing our sign, and we pulled it out of the ground to put the new one in, and it happened to be the day that the guy came. And yeah, it has nothing to do with the safety of anybody. You know, if anything, it makes me feel bad for people that are in, you know, the practice of medicine, or, you know, the Phil Ennons and Chad Tinkles of the world running hospitals, that, you know, they're sitting there looking at this kind of thing all the time with whatever level of kind of uselessness some of it is, you know, that they, you know, no doubt, I'm sure they're held accountable to every can of air freshener, whether a patient has ever been hurt by that or not, and so forth.
No doubt about that. Well, we've all seen it in the movies, Bob. You get a lighter, you get an air freshener, you put the two together, and you've got a flamethrower.
Well, we can blame that on taking Freon off the market because it was a better propellant for those. Bad for the ozone layer, but non-flammable.
That is amazing. Well, it's amazing, too, that we have used an hour already.
Oh,
we're already at the top of the hour. You'll need to come back and we'll talk some more about some things as we go. But I really appreciate your time, all the great things you guys do at Davlin. Keep up the great work. We love having you guys as part of Northwest Ohio, and it was really a lot of fun to have you back in here. And I think we're going to have to get you in here to pick your brains about other things too. How's that, huh?
Sounds great. I had a lot of fun. Thanks, Jim.
Good deal. Bob Golding, the VP for Research and Development with Davlin, has been our guest here in the Medical Hour today. It is straight up 11 o'clock, and the show always brought to you by the Medical Specialty Clinics of the Bryant Hospital and Community Health Professionals. With that, we'll turn the top of the hour. I've got some folks coming in to be with us here today with the United Way, and I see Bill Pepple's handsome face popping in the window right now, and we'll get to talking about the United Way and what's going on there right after this on the queue.
Q96.5.
All right, that worked well.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Today, when we're done,
Nope, we're going to keep moving forward.
not happy with 91%.
No, we're not.
No, we'd like to get to 100%. But usually the last 10% is the hardest. Just because.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah, because it's just kind of.
Yeah. Last year's campaign got how close? I don't think we quite met the goal last year.
We did not meet the goal. We did not meet the goal. The goal was 380 for last year, and so we backed it down to 360 this year.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
and maybe a little more attainable.
Yeah,
So.
and so now maybe you'll get that goal, and maybe you'll go over just a little bit, which is always a plus. It's never good to come at the end of the year, come to the end of the campaign and say, "Oh gosh, we hit 96%." That's.
Yeah, our goal is to achieve it
Our goal is
and
to
surpass it.
Right.
But it's difficult to do. I mean,
Correct.
it's difficult to get there. Economy-wise, guys, is the economy better nowadays? Are you finding it easier to go out and get people to donate?
The answer to that is it's obvious the economy is better, so that's probably good because we have employers and we're looking for employees. So,
Sure.
so we know that. But when Chassie talked about the industrial side, when we go to the workplaces and talk to the people, I think they're receptive,
Okay.
and a lot of the employees want to give back to United Way because if we talk about United Way and who we support, and the employees go, I was one of those before I got my job back or before they were in that situation, maybe in the financial crisis of 2008 or beyond, and they had some trouble, and some organization that United Way supports helped them, and they want to help back. So they would like to give, and they do because somebody has helped them.
Yeah, that's always a special situation, I would think, too. You always feel a little indebted when somebody is something. If you're a normal person, I'm sure there are people that don't feel that way, but
Right. So we made a presentation at a commercial business, and we won't name names, but an employee came to the owner afterwards, and he was kind of a father figure, and said, "You don't know this about me, but I was really helped by Sarah's friends, Sarah's friends now, when it was in a really difficult relationship and a situation, and I know that United Way supports Sarah's friends and some of the things, so I want to make sure that I contribute to help back, because nobody in here knows that, but because I'm not real proud of it, but I would like to make sure that we support them."
yeah. Let's keep it on a serious note here in our last break. We'll talk fun with the contest that's coming up in the Holiday City this week, okay? But we were talking off mic about how difficult it is for families, Chastity, in this area oftentimes to just make ends meet. And you've got a term for that right now, okay? So explain that to the folks that are listening to me.
Yep. What we call it is ALICE, and that means asset limited income, constrained, employed. And so basically what it is that individuals and families are trying to make ends meet, and it's a struggle. We all know when you have children, it's very expensive. And so in order to meet that cutoff, it's $28 for a family of 4. And a lot of families just don't make that cutoff. And so they don't qualify for assistance, whether it's food stamps or other assistance. And so they struggle to make ends meet month to month. So they might come just a little short. It was noted that most families cannot afford a $400 emergency. $400, and they can't afford that. If something would happen, whether to a vehicle or a medical bill, they can't take care of it.
Yeah, and when you talk $28, that's $28 an hour of income that the members of the family put together, whether it's husband and wife or whatever however that might be, whoever's throwing the money in the pot at that point.
Yep, that's
good.
good.
When you think about that, that seems to be a decent amount of money if you just off the top of your head.
And that's dialed in. That report is dialed into the life that in cost of living in Williams County. That's not statewide.
Sure.
That's in Williams County.
Sure. So if you go down to Franklin County and Columbus or something like that, I'm sure it's probably
right.
higher.
So, but what we're trying to do with the ALICE numbers are to dial them down for each specific county.
Yeah.
We can even dial it down to later. We'll be able to dial down by each community within the county.
Wow. Where did the numbers come from, guys? Who
The data comes from the IRS primarily, but it's data that we've got. Now, this data is 2015 because it takes a while to process that, but it's income data that we have and what cost of living and things for a family of 4 would exist in Williams County.
And how many homes in Williams County build it? Can we get a feel for that? What percentage of the households in Williams County would fall under that $28 per hour?
Yeah.
Any feel for that? That's probably a tough question.
That's a tough question to answer, and I would give you an estimate, and it wouldn't be accurate, so I probably would hesitate to do that. But what we do find is that You know, somebody said, well, how many people in Williams County are classified as Alice? And we're going to say that's close to 40%.
Wow.
It's higher than the poverty level, that's for sure.
So you've got poverty, which is the government identifies, and there's assistance programs for that. But then between there and Alice, it's like, well, you know, what's the motivation? The person is right on that edge. Well, I'm an Alice person or I'm in poverty, you know. So what do I keep my job and keep working? I'm trying to live the American dream, or do I say, the hell with it? Yeah. I'm just going to go back on assistance because I get my child care paid for, I get medical this, I get that, I get that, I get that. And so they're up against it. And so they're going to make choices that maybe they have to make, but some people aren't going to, who maybe have more money, are going, well, I don't like the choices you make. Well, these are choices these people have to make to exist. Yeah. And they're hard choices.
And, you know, you don't understand how fine that line is at times, you know?
Right.
The $28 is probably pretty reasonable. If you're making 27, you might as well be making 12, okay?
Right.
Because that extra $100 or a couple $100 is the difference of being over the top and being able to have a restful night of sleep, or being always wondering where you're going to come up with that $100 to pay the light bill next month.
So in that, so there was an article in one of the national papers, the Wall Street Journal, about the Walmart is going to start paying $11 an hour at a beginning wage. Okay, that's great, but
sure.
Okay, so where's the other
$17
per hour going to come from in that family of four? So you got somebody working there, and then that $28 an hour, that's not anybody saving any money. That's just food and rent and utilities and a little bit of medication if there is anybody in that. But that's not watching a movie or going and buying anything, or that's just bare.
Yeah, just basic existence at that point in time. Yeah, and we do see quite a bit of that everywhere. Yeah,
Right.
It's a real shame.
And so for Chastity going forward, it's really important that we try and pay attention to who Alice is, and I think to identify who Alice is in our community, because they're a silent group because they're really trying hard. They're not a drain on the system in any way.
Yeah.
But they're trying hard, and they got their heart in the right place. It's just it's not working for them. So do they need more training? Do they need more education? What do they need?
Yeah. Well, it's hard, and you know what? A $15 an hour job seems to be that magic number that everybody keeps talking about around the United States at this point in time, and that's it really opens up your eyes when you start to talk about $28 an hour as a person who's right on that edge.
So if you had two 15s,
yeah,
hey,
215s, you're okay, but
just okay.
yeah, that's it, and not much better than that. It's interesting, and then you have the manufacturing side that says, well, we got to keep our expenses down to this level, or we can't keep the doors open, and it's a major job. So again, that becomes part of being the new executive director here, the new boss. Chastity, how's that?
Yep.
Huh?
Yep. Absolutely. Our manufacturing friends, we reach out to them and try to help them any way we can. And,
Sure.
and the one thing you hear from them is, not only, like you said, they have to keep their costs down, but they're facing different issues that they never used to. They have struggles with employees either getting to work or issues with not being able to pass a drug test. So that's another way that we can work with those in the manufacturing field to see what we can do to help them.
Yeah. Where do you see this going, guys? What's the next phase for the United Way in Williams County? Where's Chastity going to earn her keep here for the next 20 years? How's that?
Well, Jim, I would say one of our main jobs at United Way of Williams County and all over is basically to be collaborators, conveners, connectors. Bring these agencies together, work together, and I think that doing that we can move the needle a lot further. So I think that's where I see us going. So
okay. I worry about duplication. Do we have duplication? I mean, with the agencies, you hear we had the United Way Day that day, and it was eye-opening to me to know of all the different groups that are out there. Okay. Right. And it didn't seem like there was an awful lot of overlap there, but there was some. But have we reached a point where we have enough organizations to help people? Do we have too many? Where are we at nowadays? How's that for a loaded question?
That's loaded.
I want to give that to Bill because he's going to move, and nobody's going to really have to be able to look him up here in the next few months. How's that?
So our response to that is that I think United Way wants to move to initiative funding.
Okay.
So we would say, here's the problem, identify what the problem is, and then work to put your resources towards that initiative. So if it's hunger and you would want to fight hunger, then what can we do collaboratively to fight hunger? What can we do as an initiative base to do those things? If it's workforce development, if that's an issue, trying to provide jobs and help, then it's like, okay, we have to get them trained up to do whatever it has to do. So whatever it was happened in school when those school years were there isn't relevant today, because where the manufacturing needs, they need some training. And so they want to invest in the employee, but they want to make sure the employee's dedicated to them. So it's kind of a, I got to trust you, you got to trust me. I want to spend some money on you. You're going to be here. You're going to be a good employee. So I got to try you out, so to speak. And so some of the people who come for jobs are not prepared to be an employee. They don't know how to be a good employee.
Sure,
so
sure.
you got to be trained up to be an employee. So I see United Way's job in some of that is trying to bring the job and family services, food pantries, any churches all together to work to help the people who really want to get help, and to try and help that, and to figure out ways to bring all that together to have an impact in the community to move the needle forward.
Yeah. So the target seems to move on a regular basis then, and
Right.
the focus needs to move as well. Huh?
So when you say, hey, there's a drug problem, what are we going to do about the drug problem? Well, maybe the drug problem is just a manifestation of other issues that are having to do with poverty and unemployment and those other things. And oh, by the way, they're drinking or doing drugs because they're bored out of their minds and don't know what to do and don't have any skills. Well, if they had skills, then they could find a job and do this and okay, and become an employee. But a lot of times there's some sort of breakdown between what is, I mean, you have to come to work every day, show up on time.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
That's
No, and I can make fun of that, but for me, that isn't that was a given, but culturally, but somehow we've lost some of that, and to figure that out, I think for United Way, those are kind of the areas where CHAS will try and bring together people to help that. So do we put money where it is? No, we really have some influence to try to have some influences. So do we have duplication of agencies? I don't think so, but there's lots of counseling to be done out there because we have a lot of issues relative to families and divided families and blended families, and there's lots of issues that need treatment. And so when you talk about counseling, it's really treatment, whether it's mental health. We have some physical issues, but a lot of it is mental health. So mental health needs to be addressed. So we can help that too.
Yeah, that's it.
So I don't know that I really answered your question, but I can tell you where United Way is going to go, and I think Chassis is firmly behind it because we talk about that, and the initiative seems to be the way we'd like to go. So I'll let Chas speak to that.
Yeah, Jim, I just came back from United Way training, a new President's Forum, and that was one of the main things that was so neat to hear is that how United Way Worldwide backs each of one of us individually. And it's not about United Way Worldwide's way, but it's about our own individual United Way of Williams County and what our needs are, and that how important it is to reach out to our community and service our community the way it needs to be serviced. So our needs might not be the same as other counties. And so it was just really neat to hear them be so supportive of that. It's all about you and your county. And so that's huge.
Right. And then we have cultural values in Williams County that are not the same cultural values in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or New York City, or Houston, Texas. Yeah. We have to do United Way in Williams County the way our culture would respond to it. And that's what Chas is speaking to, and I think I think United Way Worldwide respects that, so that we raise money and do it our way to do United Way.
Yeah. Now you guys go is it annually that you evaluate the different organizations that you're going to work with and support? Is that what
Yep,
happens?
we do. We have, it's called our Community Investment Committee, and it's made up of board members and people within the community, and we submit everybody that we let them know that it's grant application time, and they request an application. We send them out, and they submit them. And that committee, it's not us in the office, but it's the committee that's in charge of going through those applications and listening. We schedule agency visits where they come in and they talk to the committees, and then they talk a little bit about the programs that they're requesting funding for, and then they are the ones that decide based on need and based on request what will be distributed for that year.
Yeah.
So
okay, and that happens when? When does that go on?
that is in May. Is it May or March?
May.
It's in May.
So the grant application process starts in March.
May,
and
yeah.
April.
Yeah.
So
That's and that is I guess one way that you can control where the money's going to go and what the needs are in the community, which is probably always a moving target, no doubt about that.
So we have a board, and the board really helps us to try to guide United Way, and so
Yeah.
we're not. It's not just the staff or the executive director that's running it. There is a board.
Everybody needs a board. That's just where I'm.
Quit
How's
that, Jim. Quit
You
that.
got to have a board out there because that's always helpful.
You're working the board,
Yeah.
or somebody is.
I am working the board. How's that? We're talking United Way up until noon today. I've got Chastity and Bill with me right now. How about let's go back to some music, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and when we get back, we're going to talk about some of the fun things that are coming up with United Way.
Trivia night. We're flipping the trivia night, right?
All right, last 10 minutes or so here to get a chance to talk to the United Way. And Chastity, you guys have a real fun event coming up up at Holiday City. Tell people about this because it has grown from a little tiny event to something now that's become massive here.
Yeah, I'd say it's going to be pretty good this year. I'm pretty excited. Last year we had 14 teams who registered for our 4th annual trivia night, and this year for our 5th annual trivia night, we are currently at 25 teams.
Oh, wow.
We actually outgrew the North Atrium, so we're moving to, luckily Kate and our friends at the Quality Inn was able to accommodate us and move us to the South Atrium, which is a lot more room and can fit all of us in there.
Oh, wow. There you go. Bill, how did this all come about? How did trivia night, why did that get started?
We get started, this is the 5th, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the 5th year. As a fun event to do, I had been to Defiance County, and Carrie Wetstein was the director, and they had a trivia night there. And I attended once, and I just had so much fun. We brought a team from Williams County. I think we finished 3rd, so they were really not happy with us, being from Williams County. So, but we enjoyed ourselves and really had a good time. And I said, we can do this in Williams County. So we figured it out and tried to put it together. But it's really a fun evening for maybe some team building. You work with your coworkers and come out and do something for a few hours. And it's really kind of let your hair down a little bit and just have fun with questions and some of the things that go on. So this year we have a theme, heroes and villains. It's something different. We haven't had a theme before. So we're excited kind of about that. And where people come maybe dressed in costumes as heroes or villains. Yeah. So that's kind of cool.
Because you did have people did show up with their teams and would come in costume as
right. They had
absolutely
Bill Pepple's whatever team.
Right. Yeah, they would decorate their tables and they would come up with a theme.
Some of them got T-shirts.
Yeah, they had T-shirts, and the Fountain City Veterinarian Place did something.
The cats meow. Little cats all over them.
They had little cats
a litter pan in the center of the table.
Yeah, and it was cookies, and it was just different things that they do to come up for their team. But it's a 10-member team. But if you said, well, okay, everybody kick in $10, so it's $100 for the table. So it really is an awareness thing, but it's a fun thing. We do it for the benefit of the We Care Cabinet. But we really do it to raise awareness that, hey, it's fun to have fun, and it's okay to have fun in the name of raising money. So that's kind of a fun little idea. And just for companies, and we have companies that send teams, and they might send multiple teams. But it's just kind of, hey, I didn't work with this person. We went at trivia night. It was really fun, and so people look forward to it.
Do you have teams returning like last year's champs? Do they come back as a team?
Absolutely.
Their championship?
Yeah.
Yes, we
the
do.
group from the Bryan City Schools teachers have been, the high school beat the middle school or something, and boy, it was just their bragging rights, and there's a lot of that going. So we have a lot of fun. We have fun. We have fun games. We have fun. So
it's this Friday night.
This Friday night at the Quality Inn.
Okay.
Registration opens at 6 p.m. and trivia night starts at 7. We'll start at 7 p.m. sharp.
Okay. Now, are there room for any more teams right now? So you've got 24 already. If somebody shows up with a group of folks that want to be part of it, can they still get in? Or not?
We'll accommodate them.
We'll accommodate them. We would prefer if they would contact us. They can call the office at 419-636-8603, or they can email us at wecare@unitedwaywc.org, and they can also look us up on Facebook. We have created an event that has some of the details. The sooner you get the team registered, the better, and plus, it gives your team a little bit more time, but. Yeah, we can definitely take some more teams since we moved to the South Atrium. We have a little bit more room, but
so it's fun. It's just fun, and we have people come just to watch and see the questions come up. We have 5 rounds of questions. There's some bonus questions. It's good stuff.
Yeah, it sounds that way. Yeah.
So.
Before we let you out of here, we need to address the We Care Cabinet before you go, because I know you guys have been helping a number of folks with that one, Chastity. Mm-hmm. For anybody who doesn't know what the We Care Cabinet is nowadays, enlighten them here for me, please.
Okay. The We Care Cabinet, Bill had started the Hunger Summit, which we meet with the food pantries, and one of the needs they had was personal care items. They can't always get those items to the food pantry recipients, and so we decided to establish the We Care Cabinet, which provides personal care items to the food pantries here in Williams County. Mm-hmm. And we actually do a monthly remote. B-Rock Live does a monthly remote, and we just to promote the We Care Cabinet and also make people aware, collect donations. And we are actually doing a live remote this Friday from 3:30 to 5:30 at the Quality Inn. We'll be set up at kind of where our registration is going to be for the trivia night.
Okay.
So if people want to kind of stop out and drop off some donations, we'll be there then. And then we will get started with our trivia night. So we got a jam-packed evening on Friday.
You need to keep Andy there. He's quite a trivia buff, man. You need to keep Andy.
He's got to go do the girls'
I hear
game
he
a
has to
month.
leave for the game in Montpelier. Yeah.
So you're going to have to just say, no, I'm sorry, you can't go do the girls' whatever game tonight. You're going to have to hang around with us tonight. But yeah.
So we have to tell you what the We Care items we need.
Yeah.
So number one's toilet paper, and then we go to soap, body wash, something, shampoo, dental hygiene, which is toothpaste, toothbrushes, deodorant. Those are the items that we do. Now people say, why don't you do laundry soap? Well, we're trying to do what we can do first.
Sure. And you're focusing when you broaden it out, probably it gets a little more difficult to meet the goals that you're trying to meet.
Right. And so if you got somebody who would really like to go to a job interview and they don't have, they don't have deodorant, they don't have shampoo, and some of those things for grooming, those are just dignity items and personal care items. And we're really trying to help. We don't meet all the needs of the food pantry. This is not what this is about. We're just trying to supplement those. We're probably at 40% of the need that's out there, maybe to 50, but we try and get it to them.
Yeah. And again, it's another one of those opportunities maybe to help somebody get a better job and be able to afford some of the things they need to make ends meet on a daily basis too. So.
If they can't afford to buy food, then they certainly can't afford to buy deodorant and some of these other things that they need. Yeah. And you also have multi-generational families that are living in the same house as we go forward, and so you've got different needs inside even that house.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, with that, the hour's over, guys. I got to loose. How's that?
It's been fun.
Bill Keppel, thanks for all the effort and time and work you've done with United Way. We kid you an awful lot, but I know
That's
there's
okay.
an awful lot of work involved, and it's been a wonderful job, and I think you've done a great job for the community here for the last.
Thank you, and I appreciate the kidding because I really I enjoy it, and it's been fun working at United Way. So.
And Chastity Jagger Yoder, we're going to have a lot of fun with you over the course of the next several years. How's that?
That's great.
You get to come in and take Bill's spot, and he does come in and chat with me every now and then.
Okay,
So
that's great.
We're going to hold your feet
Get a hold
to
of
the
me.
fire.
I'll be glad to come out and talk to you anytime, Jim.
That sounds good. Guys, good luck with the trivia contest on Friday and reaching the goal. If anybody does want to contact you one more time, either to make a donation or get involved with the with Friday night's event, what's the number of the United Way?
Yep.
Chastity?
They can call us at 419-636-8603, or they can always email us at wecare@unitedwaywc.org.
Sounds good. We've got another hour. We're going to play classic hits from now until 1 o'clock right after the news here on the Q 96.5.
Thanks, Jim.